It's your most satisfying, I was 3 steps ahead of you moment. Some people are born stupid. These 2 kids perfected it. I work nights at a downtown parking garage as an attendant. It's usually a boring, straightforward job, but what happened last night was special. Earlier that evening, around 6 p.m., 2 teenagers had parked their sedan and paid for overnight parking before driving off. Standard transaction, nothing unusual. 5 hours later, they rushed back to my booth, both looking angry and frantic. The first kid pointed at a long scratch along the passenger door and said, "Look what happened to our car." I walked over to check it out. The scratch looked fresh, definitely recent. I pointed to the signs posted everywhere and said, "I'm sorry, but our liability policy clearly states we don't cover minor cosmetic damage." The second teen's face twisted with anger. One kid threatened, "My parents are lawyers and they'll shut this dump down if you don't pay up." I'd heard that line a dozen times before. Empty threats from kids who think their parents run the world. I apologized again with a smile. That's when they really started putting on a show. The first kid's voice went all shaky, his eyes getting wide like he was about to cry. He clutched his chest and said, "This is my mom's car and she doesn't know I took it. She'll literally disown me if she finds out about this scratch." His buddy jumped right in, nodding frantically and saying, "You gotta help us out here." They both stared at me with desperate puppy dog eyes. When I shook my head and pointed to the policy signs once more, they snapped right in front of me. The first kid started pacing back and forth, throwing his hands in the air. The second one stepped closer to my booth, getting in my face and yelling about how this was all my fault for not watching their car properly. They kept switching between trying to guilt trip me about the mom situation and screaming that I was being unreasonable. I watched them lose their minds for another minute, then held up my hands and said, "Look, calm down. Maybe there's something I can do here." I went into my booth, acting like I was making some important calls. When I came back, I put on my most sympathetic expression and said, "It looks like I can get you a quick payout to fix this mess before your mom finds out." I handed over the papers for them to sign. Their faces just lit up. The first kid practically bounced on his toes while he thanked me. They grabbed those papers and scribbled their signatures without reading a single word, looking like they just won the lottery. They left the booth practically skipping with excitement. Too bad for them. I'd been onto their scam from the start. When I went into my office earlier, I checked the security cameras. After they paid for parking, the kids drove into the alley next to our building. One got out, looked around for cameras, then pulled out his keys and deliberately gouged his own paint job. I almost laughed watching them think they were so clever. Right then, I knew I had to teach these little con artists a lesson they'd never forget. So while they thought they were signing insurance paperwork, I'd actually given them paperwork confessing to fraud, plus a $5,000 penalty, immediate car seizure, and a mandatory police report with their parents getting called. I figured they would have just stormed off after seeing it, but the 2 knuckleheads were so thirsty for money they didn't bother reading before signing. So once they handed back the signed papers, I said, "I'm surprised you guys signed this so quickly." They gave a confused expression until I read it out loud, word for word. Their faces went from confused to horrified as the words sank in. The first kid's voice cracked as he yelled, "Wait, what? You can't do this!" The second one started backing away, shaking his head frantically and shouting, "This is insane! We're just kids!" I slid their signed confession across the counter and said, "Actually, you just authorized me to. Thanks for the signatures." I looked at them calmly and said, "I can call the police right now with your signed confession and the security footage, or you can get in your car and drive away. Your choice." The first kid's face went white as paper. They both started apologizing frantically, stumbling over their words about how sorry they were and that they'd never do it again. I just pointed toward the exit. They practically ran to their car and peeled out of the garage so fast that they scraped the passenger side against the concrete barrier on the exit ramp. I watched from my booth, shaking my head. Now they had real damage to explain to Mom, and this time it was nobody's fault but their own.